places, everyone. We got room for everybody?
Good. How are you, sir?
All right. Okay.
Chairs comfortable like interrogation room.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the Brooklyn Public Library, a place I've spent many a fond day. I want to welcome everyone. I want to thank all the leadership of the NYPD who is here. I want to thank the elected officials. You'll hear from them in a moment. Also want to do a special shout out up front to a member of my administration who's being honored this coming weekend, Harold Miller, who's been with me a long, long time, going back to those humble public advocate days. Now our Deputy Commissioner for Community Engagement at City Hall and one of the Grand Marshals of this year's Juve Parade. I knew you win, Harold Miller. All right. As we prepare for this weekend, and especially for Monday, we celebrate one of our biggest, strongest communities here in the city, the Caribbean community. We had a fantastic reception at Gracie Mansion a few nights ago celebrating the community. And it's a reminder of hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers with heritage in the Caribbean who contribute to the city every day in so many ways. Hardworking New Yorkers, small business people, folks who are active in their community and make this city a better place. And the community celebrates and honors its history and its heritage with, of course, the parade on Monday, one of the biggest events every year in this city, and with the Juve celebration. And we've said over these last years, we honor every culture that makes up New York City. We want to give people every opportunity to celebrate their heritage. And at the same time, our job always is to make every community safe. And we know that in every community there, unfortunately, are some bad apples. Our job is to make sure that they never ruin a celebration for everyone else. The goal that we continue to work on all the time, we are the safest big city in America, and we intend to stay that way. But in the safest big city in America, you should not have to choose between your safety and celebrating your heritage. People should be able to have both at once, and we believe they will once again on Juve. So last year, after a lot of work, and after some very painful moments as well in the last few years, I want to commend all the leadership of the NYPD, all the members of the NYPD who participated with the community in determining a better approach. It was done with a neighborhood policing philosophy. So instead of just saying, here's a plan, accept it, months and months of dialogue took place. Elected officials, community leaders, NYPD officials, thinking together, how can we do something better? How can we do something different? And the plan that emerged came from the voices of community. And it really was of and by and for the community, and that's so much of why it worked. It was also important to think about not just a few hours on a certain early morning, but to think about a bigger approach. And the NYPD has had a very respectful relationship with the crisis management system, the Cure Violence movement. And members of that movement played a very important role in thinking about the best way to approach this weekend and doing so much to create a more peaceful, positive community and to help young people on a better path. That engagement, block by block, person by person engagement, well before Juve, made a big difference last year. So this is a very different kind of approach than we've seen in years past, and last year we saw the model work. We saw, of course, things we want to learn from, things we want to do better, but in essence we saw a model that was community-based and worked. So we're building upon that, and what we did last year, of course, was also with the recognition of the kind of security approaches that had worked in other major events, like most notably New Year's Eve in Times Square. That was brought to bear. the combination of different strategies we found to be what we want to do going forward and what we're going to do this year. So, like last year, the parade route will be closed to the public the night before. And also like last year, the parade will not start until it becomes light out around 6 a.m. There will be a very substantial number, over 300 light towers activated. There will be thousands of NYPD officers along the route. On top of that, it's not just going to be light towers on the parade route, but in some cases on the surrounding blocks as well to create a safer environment. And there'll be more mobile patrol units to help cover a broader area. There'll also be an additional entry point added, and Chief Rodney Harrison will talk about that in a moment, but to help ease the flow of crowds and make the day go a little bit better for people. But look, the bottom line is a huge number of people come to Juve in pride, in respect of their heritage, to be with each other, to abide by the law and to celebrate peacefully. Unfortunately, in the past, a very small number of people have come to make trouble. We will not tolerate that. We will not tolerate violence. We will not tolerate people who in any way undermine everybody else's celebration. And there'll be obviously a huge, vigorous NYPD presence working with community leaders to make sure this is a safe event. I would finish in English by saying the Juve celebration has always belonged to the people. It has always been a positive expression of the people. This year, as last year, it will be a celebration that the people can enjoy and they can enjoy safely. And that's what we intend to make the norm for years to come. With that, just a few words in Spanish. Juve es uno de los eventos más alegres e importantes de nuestra ciudad. Estamos trabajando para que la fiesta de este año sea la mejor y más segura de nuestra historia. Nueva York es la ciudad grande más segura del país. Nadie debe verse obligado a elegir entre su seguridad y celebrar su cultura. With that, I want to turn to our Chief of Patrol, and I want to thank Rodney Harrison for the exceptional work he did in the last year's preparations, one of the architects of last year's successful strategy, now carrying it through in his new position. Chief.
So good afternoon. Before I get started, I would like to acknowledge our new borough commander for Brooklyn South, Brian Conroy, former school safety chief, and now taking over the helm for soon to retire Steve Powers. So congratulations, Brian. So I'm here today to share with you the NYPD's plans for the annual Juve celebration and the 51st annual West Indian Day Parade on Monday, September 3rd. You know, the Juve celebration consists of steel band parade from the various Caribbean countries, and event organizers are projecting 26 bands and over 300,000 spectators. Participants in Juve will start lining up at 2 a.m. on Flatbush Avenue from Empire Boulevard to Grand Army Plaza, and the parade will begin at 6 a.m. by going south on Flatbush, turning east on Empire, proceeding south on Nostrand, and ending on Midwood Street. Approximately 2 miles in length, and it's going to end around 10 a.m. For the 51st annual West Indian Day Parade, floats and participants will start lining up around 10 a.m. in the morning, and the march itself will formally step off at noon. The parade will run on Eastern Parkway from Schenectady Avenue and end at Grand Army Plaza. Event organizers are expecting at least 40,000 participants and more than 1 million spectators. We will be deploying thousands of uniformed officers throughout the route and the surrounding areas. We will also be utilizing hundreds of light towers and numerous blocker vehicles. Juve and the West Indian Day Parade is one of the largest cultural parades the city offers, We want everyone at Juve and the parade to have an enjoyable event. And the men and women of the NYPD are committed to ensuring the safety of all participants and attendees at the event. And if anybody sees anything suspicious, please let our officers know or feel free to call 911. By working together, we can make Monday and every day safe for all New Yorkers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it. Now, as I said, a lot of elected officials played a role, not just this year, but in previous years, in really ensuring the community was part of planning this and thinking of new and better approaches. And certainly, one leader who was passionate, who often hosted the meetings, who brought his knowledge of policing and his history in the community to bear in the discussion. And one of the reasons we got to such a good solution is the good work of our Borough President, Eric Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for both. Yeah, you can clap. It's my borough. A serious, I thank you, Chief Harrison, just for really the overview. And one thing I think is important as we move towards this weekend, Juve takes place in Crown Heights and Flatbush, not in Williamsburg or Marine Park. So if there's an incident that happens in another area, please do not attach it to Juve and say we had a violent weekend. Because the reality is, we don't define that weekend as being whatever happens anywhere in the city that is attached to Juve. And I believe that what the mayor did and the former chief of Brooklyn South and the entire team of looking at this problem, it was very important to me several years ago when the call was made after we had several incidents. The call was made that we needed to disband or take away a cultural, rich celebration that's really attached to the Caribbean diaspora and the Caribbean community. And I was clear then and clear now, the New York City Police Department does not surrender to crime. Crime surrenders to us. This city will never send a message that there's an event, legal event in the city that we cannot police. That is unimaginable. The entire globe watch how we handle different situations, crowds, how do we handle our events, everything from the millions of people who are at Times Square to the countless number of people who will participate in parades, multiple parades at any given time. That is what makes us the finest. You can't be the finest if you're not willing to take on any challenge. And that's what we saw. And you're not seeing the start of the planning process. Immediately after last year, community groups, the police department came together with the Juve organized elected officials and started planning for this year, looking and doing an analysis. What can we do differently? What was successful, what was not? As Chief Harrison pointed out, one of the complaints that was given to us was the lines were too long, and it was taking too long for people to get in the parade site. The chief just indicated that we're going to have multiple lines. And these flyers here are amazing. They're great. They're so important. They point out what you can bring, what you can't bring. And so it's extremely, extremely important that parents who allow their children to come out, if they're telling you they're coming out at 2 in the morning, 1 in the morning, 5 in the morning to go to Juve, no, they're not. If they're saying that they're supposed to bring alcohol with them, no, they're not. And so part of the role of ensuring our children and participants are safe is to the first checkpoint needs to be at the doorway of many of our households where our young people are coming from. They need to participate in the process. If you see someone leaving your house that appears to be intoxicated, they shouldn't go out. The drugs and violence go hand to hand, and far too many times alcohol and violence go hand to hand. And so when we hand out these flyers with basic information of the parade route, what people should expect, what they should do, is just some of the proactive things that the police department and community groups and organizations are doing. Mayor's right. We have to really commend Cure Violence. Last year, they were on the parade route in Juve, speaking to people and really using their experience to de-escalate situations. It's a very exciting moment for many people who wait all year to participate in this event, and we want to make sure that people can do it in a safe manner. This community is changing. The demographics are changing. Gentrification, this is ground zero for gentrification. And those who are from the Caribbean diaspora are really concerned about not being able to carry out those long, rich traditions. I participated in the Caribbean Day Parade as a child, secured this parade as a police officer, marched as a senator and a borough president. I would love to see this tradition continues. We want to do it in a safe fashion. No one does it better than the men and women of the New York City Police Department. This is going to be a textbook case that other agencies across the city, if not the globe, can reflect on. The headlines of this being a dangerous environment will change. We're going to make it safe. There are going to be some moments where we're not going to get everything we want and do everything we would desire, but we're on the right paths. And so great job, Chief. Great job, the entire team, for coming together with these solutions. Great job to the community for participating and making this happen to make sure that Juve and the West Indian Day Parade is a safe one as we march up the parkway.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, Senator Kevin Parker is an expert on this event because it happens in his district, and he also has been a key player in helping us to make sure that it is safer and there's a plan made with the community. Senator Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me just add my voice to the borough presidents to thanking the mayor, Chief Harrison, and the entire police department. But I really want to thank Yvette and the folks at Juve City International for being a stalwart in terms of bringing our culture to the fore and really never giving up. Because at times when people were saying we need to get rid of the parade, she continued to believe in the vision of making sure that this cultural expression was maintained in this community. And so I wanted to thank her and appreciate her friendship and her partnership. Again, to echo what everyone has said, we want people to come out. We want people to have a good time. We want them to have a good time in the right contexts. And so come out, understand what the rules are, understand that this is not going to be something that's not going to be kind of as free-flowing as it has been. And we need to make sure that we're following the rules to make sure that everyone remains safe. And so we look forward to seeing everybody on Monday morning early. And we're looking forward to being on the Parkway with you as well. Again, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much, and we look forward to enjoying both Juve and the Labor Day Parade.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Senator. Now, Councilmember Jamani Williams has also been an important part of this process, working with the community, working with NYPD, also someone who's been one of the leading supporters in the city of the crisis management system and the Cure Violence movement, and the connection, the role they've played here is such an important part of why things are working better. So I want to thank you for that support of the movement, and my pleasure to introduce Councilmember Jamani Williams.
Is it on? Labor Day are coming. Afternoon, everybody. Thank you to the mayor, the chief, my colleagues. Big thank you to Yvette Rennie, Juve City International, and all the community groups that were mentioned. This is a great time. It's something I look forward to since I was young. My parents are from a small island called Grenada, and I've been coming to Juve and the Carnival since I was young. Actually, I thought Labor Day was a Caribbean holiday until I was an adult. Literally, I really did. And a few years ago, everybody was trying to tell us to either shut down Juve. There were also calls to shut down the parade. And when we pushed back, people would say, we don't care about the violence. We don't care about people dying. And we would say nothing could be further from the truth. We want to do what everybody wants to do, which is preserve their culture and celebrate their culture. We, more than most of the people who are screaming at us, have to deal with this violence on a regular basis. We're the ones who deal with the families. We're the ones who go to the funerals. Nobody wants that. What we were also saying is while everybody was focused on this day, there was violence the other 364 days of the year that no one seemed to care about. and that no one could say if these events did not happen, there would not be violence in some of the same neighborhoods. And so that we could allow people to celebrate their culture and do it in safety, do it in safety if we all got together. This is an example of that happening. First, that what the borough president raised up is important, because when this works in other cities and other places, the environment in the city, it adopts this as a cultural celebration. Many people looked at this as something other than New York City. When we start looking at it as a part of New York City, as a part of the fabric, everyone here is a part of the community, you have a different mindset to it. And the other part was, we said, if we begin to address the gun violence as a whole, we guarantee you that gun violence will drop all over, including on these days. And I always want to take the opportunity to celebrate what the mayor did, what the police did, what the city council did in changing how we're dealing with public safety and gun violence in the city of New York. They told us when we started to do these things that the sky would crack open, black and brown people would fall from it and destroy the entire city. Almost 6 years later, as the mayor says, we're the safest city we've been since 1951, the safest big city in America. That is a huge accomplishment, and I want to say thank you as many times as I can. As you might know, I've had the opportunity to travel the state. We are doing much better here than so many places across the state that are trying things the same old way. I always want to make sure I say, even though we're moving in the right direction, if you are a victim of crime, the data means nothing to you because the crime happened to you, and so we still have to continue moving in the right direction, which we will. I'm also happy that the police department and everyone addressed concerns that people had even after last year. This is a live conversation that should never stop. People have a tendency to think that better policing and safer streets is a conversation that stops. It shouldn't. It's dynamic. It's always going to continue. And I wanted to make sure that people like Yvette Rennie, Juve City International, the bands, were part of the conversation and felt comfortable with what's going on. They are, and they are. And so I think this is something that people should celebrate. You know, if there's things that we need to change next year, we'll change it again, and we'll keep moving and keep, as things change, we change. So I'm excited about where we are. Last year, we saw some things, they adjusted it, and I'm sure we'll have an even better time this year. I'm looking very much to celebrating my culture on Monday morning at Juve, and then again on Eastern Parkway. So I hope to see all of you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamani. Finally, want to introduce someone who's done just a huge amount of work over the last few years, not only to make Juve a great event, but to work with the police, to work with the community to make sure it is a safe event. And the progress that's been made could not have been made without her. My pleasure to introduce Yvette Rennie, the president of Juve City International.
Thank you very much, and I do appreciate that. On behalf of 32 Mast and Steel Band organizations, we would like to say thanks to everyone for helping us. In the audience is the president of United States Steel Band Association. Juve consists of steel band only, the only instrument that was invented in the 21st century, and that's very important to us. We, the community, would like to thank the mayor for working very closely for us, for allowing his staff, the Commissioner Harold Washington.
No, that's Harold Miller.
Miller, I'm
Harold
sorry.
Washington was the mayor of
yes.
Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah,
That's really very different.
But just that was a moment of going back. Just a little bit. Right, Miller, for working extremely closely for us for almost 2 years to make it safe. He spent his time, he organized, and he was there daily with us. So he will be one of our cultural ambassadors. Also, Brooklyn Borough President, his office also, they opened their doors for our meetings. So all the meetings were held there, and the staff was very good. And for Councilman Jamani Williams, thank you. And for Senator Parker, thank you. And mostly the police commissioner, O'Neill, this year, he did something fantastic. He allowed one of his detectives to work very closely with us. That's Detective Joseph, and she created a device that she went out into the community and teach her police officers what Juve is about, what to look for. Do not just disregard us. Do not just throw us by the wayside. Work deeply with us. And, and this is the first time this has happened. So we are extremely grateful for that. This year, based on last year, we will be following the same methods. We just treated just a little bit too soon because there were complaints. However, we did listen to the complaints. We did listen to our residents, and we were able to fix it just a little bit. But we are determined to keep the same as before. What I would like the media to do is to take us out of the negativity that we have been buried under. It's a minute grouping of people, ill behaviors that create that setting in my community. And they have been doing that throughout the year.
That's right.
But however, the media seem to bury us underneath it, and we have been stifled. My culture is a great culture. My culture comes from a struggle. My culture comes from defying the so-called slave masters when we had to fight for our lives, especially Jamaica with their jab. Grenada with their jab. And what they did, they used the molasses that was burning the sugar cane to dress themselves out, to make sure the slave master, from the economic perspective, was defeated. So we are not just enjoying ourselves out there crazily. We have a strong history behind what we are doing. We have a strong history to teach our children. And one of the things I like with this part of our outreach, we reached out to the schools. We reached out to the churches. We reached out to all the community-based organizations. So they are understanding where our culture is coming from. So I'm pleading with you, remove us from underneath that negativity that we have been buried under. Right? So that's very important to us. And at the same time that we are speaking about this, within the city, there has been a great economic windfall. And somehow, we, the producers of this beautiful, spectacular event that everyone is enjoying, we are not receiving to help us build it further. So what we are going to do, we have decided to do a feasibility study and present it to the city to see exactly what we are bringing to the table and what we should be getting back from the city. Because during that period of time, all the businesses gain from what we are doing, especially the small businesses in the surrounding community, the hotels, the one who sells the soda, the materials, the beads, and every possible thing. But we are at a standstill. So from next year, we decided that we're going to take a different approach. Once you all pull us out from underneath that negativity, we'll be able to sell our culture better. Thank you very much, and I thank everyone for listening to what we have to say.
Thank you, Yvette. Okay, we're going to take questions about Juve and the preparations and anything else police-related, and then we will take questions on other topics. Yes?
In terms of Juve and the parade, you said you're drawing from what worked last year didn't work. Can you be completely transparent and honest? Tell us what worked and what didn't work.
I'll start and let the experts weigh in. I mean, from my point of view, what worked was a very strong consultative process with the community. What worked was the parallel efforts of the crisis management system and the Cure Violence movement, the earlier start time, the use of the checkpoints. All of those things, I think, worked. Clearly, as we've indicated, we wanted to do better on the number of checkpoints because there were some lines we want to see if we can improve that. So from my point of view, most of the strategy worked, but it's clearly going to be refined every single year.
So, pretty much want to piggyback off what the mayor was saying. I think moving Juve back, I think, helped the event go a little bit smoother. Also, having light towers in certain areas where it was very dark, I think, helps us do a little bit of a better job policing certain areas, as well as having the officers that somewhat mirror the people participating also helps as well. So a couple little nuances that we always evaluated ourselves and took a look at, I truly believe helped the event to get better throughout the years.
Okay, yes.
It sounds like from the plan and from the press release that besides the additional checkpoint, secure checkpoint, that seems to be the major difference. Is there anything else that's going to be super different from this year than last year? As well as, I know that there have been some reports of shootings last year. It seems to me they were before the start. Was there anything, can you remind us of those crime stats from the actual day?
Okay, so there was, just want to make sure this is very clear, there was no violence on the route and during the route, which is very, very important. I want to make sure that there was no violence during the parade or Juve last year. That's very important. And once again is the relationships that we are building with the community to get people to want to share information with us, I truly believe is helping the events become much more successful this year and as well as going into the future.
Okay.
Oh, and the differences?
Okay, go
Sorry.
ahead.
Oh, I'll let the borough commanders talk about some of the differences. I'm sorry.
So, again, the extra entry point. Again, the extra entry point is a difference this year, and that's a response to meetings, numerous meetings we had with the community on this event, and that's something they requested, and we're doing that. We're pushing a little bit more light towers, a few more light towers. We're going to push them a little bit farther away from the parade route. So that's another difference that we learned from last year. But we were very successful last year, so that's why most of everything we're doing is the same. And a lot of the officers that work in the entry points will be from the Patrol Borough Brooklyn South area. So that's part of using the neighborhood policing strategy. So they'll know the community. They'll know many of the people coming into the event. So that's another part of the thing that we're making sure we have this year also.
Excellent.
On the Blasio murder, one of our reporters was told that a 911 call from Rachel Wheeler was prompting to kill her. Is this accurate? And what did she say on the 911 call?
Can you just repeat the middle part?
The question, on the Blasio murder, one of our reporters was told that the 911 call reached Wheeler and prompted him to kill her. Is that accurate? And what did she say on the 911 call?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the theories that's being looked at. On August 22nd, I believe, which was a Wednesday, there was a 911 call placed from the residence where we believe the murder occurred. That call was placed by Velasquez, and it was essentially, the call starts out, it's about 5 minutes in length. It starts out that she wants to report to the 911 operator what she calls a kidnapping. What it was a custodial interference type situation between what turns out to be the two people that were charged with murder.
Now, on the, is there any domestic violence history between the two suspects?
Between the two people that were charged, there were a number of prior calls to that apartment of a domestic nature. I would categorize it in at least 4 calls.
topic, please?
Yeah, please, go ahead. Hold on a sec. So let's do that. Let's finish up on anything Juve related.
To ask the NYPD, are they going to be enforcing no public drinking, the selling of alcohol, Kool-Aid alcohol on the streets, and also the smoking marijuana in public places?
Okay, so the officers will be able to have the ability to use discretion. If you haven't heard, September 1st, we have a new policy regarding how we're going to deal with marijuana. One of the things we will be doing this year is if we come across an individual that is smoking marijuana in public, that person will more than likely be receiving a criminal court summons in contrast to placing them under arrest, because we want to try to keep the officers out there on post so they could keep the event running smoothly and safe. Are there certain carve-outs that someone may be placed under arrest? Yes, there is, but overall, we're going to start our new policy September 1st regarding issuing criminal court summonses.
Can you speak to alcohol also?
Yeah.
Oh, and regarding alcohol, once again, is if we come across somebody that is drinking, discretion will be used, but if need be, we will issue a summons for that as well.
What about if they're minors and they're selling alcohol in the street from coolers?
Then we will confiscate that alcohol and as well as issue that person a summons.
I want to remind everyone two things. One, it's always, depending on the specifics of the instance, arrest is also an option if there's outstanding warrants or other factors involved. And second, that we really value the presence of the officers who are there that evening. As you heard from the chief, the officers more and more now come from the local commands, know the community. We want to keep them on duty there, and one of the things that we have emphasized as being a virtue of the new marijuana policy is does not take an officer off patrol to go through the whole procedure of arrest, which is many hours, and by definition, the officer is no longer on patrol. A summons is the reverse. To give the summons and right back on patrol and there to help keep people safe. So this is an important factor in the equation, but the bottom line, I think the underlying point to your question, we're not going to tolerate marijuana smoking, we're not going to tolerate drinking, we're not going to tolerate the sale of any drugs or alcohol. Yes. Let me start one more second. Anything else on Juve? I just want to clean that up. Go ahead.
I'd like to hear about Imani and that, I know that last year, while safety obviously is very important, there was also a lot of resentment in communities that the new security had changed the spirit of the event. So I'd like the two of you to talk to what changes did you ask for that you didn't get? What changes are there that you feel like they return the event more to the previous spirit? The only change we've heard about is one additional entry point. Is there anything else here that we guarantee you've gotten that the tone will be different? Speak to that,
We had several meetings with 67 South and Chief Conroy, and we worked very closely with him on certain measures that we took to make the atmosphere more friendlier than it was last year. One of the things that we are looking at is to the entry point by the library to put more areas so it would not be congested like it was before, like it was on the year of 2017. We would not be starting as high up as the zoo. We'll be starting right by the actual, right in front of the museum, right in front of the library and Flatbush Avenue. So that will take away that congestion that took place right by the zoo. So all those things are in place. Mostly, it's very few people complain about what we did last year. We get more positive feedback, and we are hoping to do the same thing. Our people have received it well. And yes, you'll always have a minute of people who will say something against what we have done. However, it was safe, and that's number one to all of us. And we are happy that it went that way.
First, I want to make sure lift up a couple people's name. Bill Howard, who passed away, and Ellie Manette, who's 91 from Trinidad, a famous steel pan performer. Just want to make sure we keep their spirit alive when we're discussing this. I also want to make sure we point out that this is not and has never been the most violent weekend of the year, and so I always want to make sure we point that out when we have these discussions. When I was there last year, it was a new. Also, so off the bat, change is going to make people uncomfortable. So we always have to make sure that we point that out. Having participated in all of these for many years, there's not much sleep that happens. And so I think it's Thursday to Monday is one day. But I think when people finish from Sunday, they were used to going straight to Juve. When I first got there, I was very concerned because at the beginning, no one was there. I think people, understanding that it was going to change, maybe went home and tried to get a nap. If you have ever participated in the weekend, a nap is a dangerous thing at that moment in time. And so I think people may have slept a little longer than they expected. But I did see people finally begin to come out, and so I was very happy about that. My hope is with the additional information of what's happening, we'll see even more people. The biggest complaint that I got was the amount of police presence and the long lines, the checkpoints. Some people don't want any checkpoints at all. I leave that and support the Juve City International. They are comfortable with it. There are more checkpoints now, so it should go quicker. The police presence looks a lot harsher when there's nobody there. Like when I was there, when it's filled, doesn't look as much. I'm not sure if they're going to be deployed differently, so at least there doesn't look like as much heavy police presence in one concentration. And so I hope that's something that is going to be looked at as well. And I haven't seen even as much police presence as I've seen in the days leading up to it. So I think that's all beneficial.
Thank you.
Last year, my recollection is that for many days ahead of Juve, already the lights were in place, they were turned on at night, there was, the barriers were already, ready to be set up. It gave the appearance that the police department is trying to send a message ahead of the event. This year is different. Now, I don't see that same thing this year. Have you decided to wait before deploying some of these things?
If I stand corrected, I believe we started doing it maybe 2 days before the event. Wasn't 4 days before it, so you'll see it up there within the next 48 hours at least.
Right. So, I mean, part of the context everybody needs to understand is that Juve is not just a parade, right? It's a time, right? And so if Carnival is happening on Monday, then Monday morning, Sunday night is Juve by definition. Just like if New Year's is Monday, then Sunday night is New Year's Eve, period. It's happening, right? And so there are lots of activities that are happening. As you heard the councilman talk about, this stuff actually, we've been doing stuff since last Wednesday in the community. The mayor just had something on Tuesday that has become an institution as part of the celebration of it in terms of his acknowledgement of it as an important cultural activity here in the state, as he does with many other parades and many other cultural activities that he hosts at Gracie Mansion. But tonight, down the block behind the museum, they're going to start going hard with, reggae tonight and then, ladies' night and brass fest and panorama. So every night there's going to be something going on. And typically around Friday, and because again, most of this happens in my district, which is Flatbush, Shanice Flatbush, Midwood, Ditmas Park, Windsor Terrace, and Park Slope. So I'm dealing with all those communities are engaged in this in various ways. On Church Avenue, which is kind of an unofficial parade route, the 6th Precinct has done an excellent job at making sure that community and that area is safe, but at the same time respecting noise complaints and other issues that may arise from the large number of people who are congregating to revel. And so again, we want to thank the police department, not just for the work, but for the partnership and the fact that we are now all engaged in a process that allows folks to enjoy themselves, to have cultural expression, and at the same time do that in the most safe way possible.
Yeah.
Could we get Detective Joseph to talk about what he or she did in interacting with police officers? instructing them about the ways.
Does someone know about that?
Yeah, she's here, Rocco, but maybe, Kenneth, if you don't mind, I'll have her speak to you afterwards regarding some of the great things that she's been doing.
Anyone want to typify it? Just
I just know that she's been going into the East Flatbush and Flatbush area, meeting with a lot of the merchants, talking about some of the upcoming concerns and putting them in, and making sure that people are aware of what the police department is going to be looking for in regards to making sure that it's a shared responsibility to make sure that this event runs smoothly.
Just to add, Detective Joseph is from the community, and so I think it was one of the best decisions that was made. She served in the 67 precinct with many of us, so she has all the connective tissues, whether it's the bands, the police department, the elected officials. So it was a natural choice, and I'm glad that that happened this year. I hope it's something that continues.
okay. Way back.
What time does the parade route close Sunday night? What time do people expect to kind of, do we know yet?
Be around 10:30 to 11 o'clock that night. We'll start telling people, you know, that we're going to be restricting the area, that they'll have to come in and come back into the entrance.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, we gotta get you this mic.
Oh,
It needs to be lit.
oh.
Okay, do that again.
Yeah, so about 10:30, 11 o'clock the evening before, we'll be telling people that, and we'll put notice out to that. We put, putting information out and that, so the community knows that.
So is there anything else on Juve? Yes?
Please. So there was a comment I don't think I understood. At 2 a.m., people get to line up. I heard that a little while ago.
The contingents in the parade.
Oh, the people that are in the parade
participating.
at 2 o'clock in the...
Right, the bands will be
Yeah.
escorted from their yards over to the formation area, and we'll be escorting them over there.
Additional officers are you going to have compared to last year?
We pretty much had the same number of officers that we had last year.
I just note any of the big parades, there's a staging, if you like think about Manhattan parades, staging area on the side streets like hours in advance so everyone gets ready. Okay, on Juve, last call, going once, twice. Other police matters, just want to see if we got anything else. Police, go ahead.
Chief Shea, just regarding the Bronx murder, the suspect Wheeler, the male suspect, tell us what you know of his prior attempted murder conviction, what that involved.
Yeah, Daquan Wheeler is a male, 31 years of age. He has several prior convictions. He's currently on parole. Prior arrest in 2006, I believe, resulted in a conviction, and that was a robbery case. And then most recently, in 2015, a burglary case where he pled guilty to attempted burglary, was sentenced to 1.5 to 3 years. That's what I have in front of me here, Rocco. Could have been part of the plea.
Okay, go ahead.
And Chief, just on that 911 call, can you clarify what was that 911 call about?
Yeah, so again, last Wednesday, the 22nd, we believe our victim called 911 from the Longfellow address, 1006 Longfellow, from the apartment where ultimately she was killed. She called reporting what she claimed to be a kidnapping, and the kidnapping turned out to be the father of the child removing the child from the apartment. The call lasted approximately, from my recollection, about 5 minutes. And that was a domestic dispute that the victim of the homicide was not involved in. She's reporting a domestic incident regarding essentially her friend. As I said earlier, there were a number of prior domestic incidents coming back. From my recollection, at least 4. But this is still ongoing. That has to be sorted out in terms of were all of them involving the same 2 people. Some of them, as you know, people can call and have a domestic incident and refuse to give their name. So that all needs to be sorted out. But there appears at this time that there were some prior incidents between the 2 people that ultimately were charged with Ms. Velasquez's death.
Police respond that day and make contact with her in the house?
On the 911 call, I don't have that in front of me right now.
Okay, any other police matters? Yes?
Chief, was Wheeler there when she made the call?
Yeah, this is, so when Wheeler, there's a lot of different days, it's been a busy week, Rocco. On 8/22, when she makes that call, Daquan Wheeler has already left the residence, and she states that in the 911 call. Police do respond that day to the earlier question. and take a report. But I don't recall whether it was the 9/11 caller or the woman that lives there that was there to provide the information at that time. So that has to be sorted out.
Go ahead.
Day was the 911 call, and you said that the child is not associated with Velasquez, but a friend of hers. Who was the friend?
So I'll go back a little bit. And the time of day, I do not have in front of me. But 2 people have been charged in Ms. Velasquez's death. Kiara Martinez and Daquan Wheeler, both at this time charged with murder in the 2nd degree. The child that I'm referencing, which was the subject of that particular 9/11 call, it's believed is the child of Ms. Martinez and Mr. Wheeler.
You referred to a friend. Martinez is the friend.
That's correct.
Okay, let me see if there's any other police matters. Yes?
Yeah, do we have any updates or information on the Indigenous pizza delivery incident in Harlem?
Yeah. Last night on the overnight in the 30th precinct, very fresh in terms of this incident. On Amsterdam Avenue, I believe it's around the 1700 block of Amsterdam Avenue, we have an individual, a male Hispanic, who is a pizza delivery man, pulls up to the location, goes inside, comes immediately outside. There's a scaffolding in that area. It's believed he's chaining up his bicycle. And then from a short distance away, it appears at this time that one shot is fired, striking the delivery man for a Papa John's pizza place in the head, causing his demise. There's a couple of different theories that we have at this point. I won't go into, but it's a little preliminary. I won't go into anything else beyond that at this time.
Okay, anything else police related? Going one. Yes.
Chief Harrison, Mr. Mayor, for you also. Just regarding the new marijuana policy effective September 1, can you talk about what you hope to achieve, the number of less arrests you anticipate making, and can you address the issue of racial disparity, how that might change, or if it will change at all in terms of who gets summoned, who gets arrested?
I'll just start and say, look, when we went down this road, which really begins with the decision a few years ago to end arrests for low-level marijuana possession, and now ending arrests for smoking in public. Again, not in every instance. I want to always remind people there can be extenuating circumstances where there's still an arrest, but over as a question of policy, ending arrest. A number of goals in mind. One was to reduce unnecessary arrest, and this has been a very central concept, certainly during Commissioner Bratton's time and Commissioner O'Neill's leadership. The concept of ensuring that the NYPD was using the right enforcement tool for each situation and respecting officer training and officer discretion. Remember, in 2017, 100,000 fewer arrests than in 2013. With better public safety results. So we're committed to reducing unnecessary arrest. We're committed to reducing disparity. And that work is going to be ongoing. There's a lot that goes into reducing disparity, but I want to argue from the very beginning, if you are not arrested, you are not experiencing the reality of arrest. The highest form of reducing disparity is to reduce the overall number of arrests, and that's what we proceeded to do. But we believe we can do all that while continuing to deepen public safety.
And if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, I don't have the numbers in front of me, Rocco, but our new policy, we're going to see a humongous drop in people in the communities of color being arrested for marijuana. And that was one of the whole goals of this whole new policy.
That's exactly right. Any other police-related questions? Going once. Police-related, yes.
Can you talk about the drowning in Orchard Beach? Who was that yesterday?
Got that? Okay, I think we're going to have to get back to you on that. We'll have someone follow up. Our folks will follow up with you right away. Police-related, yes.
Can I just ask on a serious of attacks on MTA bus drivers in Brooklyn? I think they have a wanted poster out in the 88 for a series of attacks. Do you think these are all connected, or are they separate incidents?
No, we're seeing, and it is troubling, we're seeing a number of different attacks. When you look at the 60,000-foot view, if you will, of MTA workers, whether they're bus and train operators. The numbers are down, but that's little consolation. As somebody said earlier, if you're the victim of that particular attack, you don't care to hear statistics about crime. We don't see any correlation between the different ones at this point in time, but if you go on to our Twitter page, we have retweeted, if you will, an MTA poster. We're still looking for information. We've made a number of arrests recently on different attacks, 2 different attacks, 2 individuals, and 1 separate attack with 1 individual. But there are several more that we still need to identify the perpetrators. So I ask anyone with information, view that Twitter page at NYPD Detectives, and you can see, and please call Crime Stoppers. Let me just say that with this horrible, horrible tragedy in the Bronx from this past week, it was a Crime Stoppers tip called in, which led to us identifying Ms. Velasquez. So the system works. It works great, and as been said many times before, it's a shared responsibility, and this is a team effort, so we need the public's help.
Amen. Go ahead.
This overlaps a little bit, but I'll ask you now. There's been some stories in recent days about issues within security detail. Commissioner O'Neill, a couple of days ago, said he was going to let the IAB investigation play out before deciding whether or not to do anyone. Are you comfortable with that? And what is your assessment of how the detail is working and some of the issues that have been raised in the stories?
I'm definitely comfortable with the approach the police commissioner is taking. Of course, any matter that's brought to his attention should be looked at, and it will be. But if you're talking about now 4.5 years of working with my security detail, I think it's been well run. I think it's provided an excellent approach to security and worked well with me and my family, so I'm very satisfied. And I have a lot of respect for the members of the detail and the leadership of the detail. So, again, any details, any specific issues will be looked at, and then we'll speak to it once that's completed. Last call on police matters. Okay, non-police matters. Andrew.
Mayor, last night in the gubernatorial debate, Governor Cuomo said, I love Mayor Blasio. I think he loves me too. So my first question is...
It's like a Valentine.
Do you love Governor Cuomo?
I have known the governor since 1995. I respect him. Obviously, we've had times when we were closer and times when we had differences, but I respect him. I have some real philosophical disagreements with the governor. I have a very different understanding of what it means to be a Democrat. I have some real differences on how he has addressed some of the issues related to New York City. But of course, I respect him. And there's a long-standing connection. And, I talk to him on a regular basis, and even when we disagree, we still can talk to each other.
Follow-up to that, Cynthia Nixon this morning indicated that perhaps the reason you either won't or haven't endorsed her is because you're fearful of the reaction from the governor and perhaps a vindictive response towards the city. Is that the reason you're not endorsing Cynthia?
So first of all, we New Yorkers don't live in fear. That's the nature of being a New Yorker. And obviously, when, I always quote the Egg Koch approach to governors in New York State. When they do something good for New York City, praise them and support them. When they do something that hurts New York City, address it, take it on, challenge it. That's what I've tried to do. But look, as to the governor's approach when someone disagrees with him, I've spoken to that in the past. My views on that are well known.
Are you not going to endorse him?
Again, when I have something to say about any of these elections, I assure you, you'll be the first to know. Marcia, I think you were there last night.
So actually, I have a question about the debate, surprisingly. So the governor said that he would be willing to ask the MTA to postpone next year's fare hike, and if you and he would contribute to the shortfall that MTA would have. We're not having a fare hike, which is $325 million, which your share would be $160 million.
So people have, I will speak for my fellow 8.6 million New Yorkers, we're not suckers. Right now, the people of New York City are paying the vast majority of the cost of our subways and buses. That's the fact. The city government provides a lot more direct funding to the MTA than the state government does from its budget. The state sometimes tries to claim the taxes that are there dedicated to the MTA. Those are already dedicated to the MTA. It's not new money. In fact, one of my differences, to the point in the previous question, I'll call out the governor when I think he's wrong. During his term as governor, almost $500 million earmarked for the MTA was taken from the MTA and moved over to the state budget. That's part of why the MTA is having the trouble it's having. So no, I'm not falling for that. We need a permanent funding solution to fix the MTA. It can be done. I think Mr. Byford's doing a good job. I think his plan seems to be the right plan. I believe the price tag is 30 to 40 billion. That sounds right to me. We're not going to get 30 to 40 billion out of the city budget, the same city budget that has to pay for policing, sanitation, schools. We're going to get it from either a millionaire's tax or, as some prefer, congestion pricing, or some combination of tools. But ask experts like Dick Ravitch, who I think is one of the people who understands the MTA the best historically. He'll be the first to tell you, if you don't get a new funding source, we can't fix these problems.
Another question from the debate. Cynthia Nixon talking about state troopers who've been assigned here in New York City,
Right.
despite the fact that we have a robust NYPD.
We have the finest police force in America. Is that what you meant to say?
I meant to say. So she said that we should be spending less on law enforcement. And I wonder if you agree with that assessment.
Look, that was a broad answer, and I don't know what she specifically feels. I would say when it comes to the state police presence, I think what would have been smarter would have been to coordinate with the NYPD from the beginning and determine what the NYPD thought made sense. Of course, there are some very specific roles for state police to play in New York City. But I don't know why on earth the state and the governor didn't reach out. It originally started under Commissioner Bratton and say, we have this idea, how should we approach it? That didn't happen. And I think it's been part of a pattern of the governor not having a positive vision for New York City and how to work with New York City. And I certainly didn't hear it last night. I mean, I've had this conversation with him. Why not, when you have a city that's 43% of the state's population, there's no state in America that has a single city with a higher percentage of its population than we have in New York City, New York State. We're almost half of the state's population. Why not start with a positive vision for how to help New York City, how to work with me as mayor and my administration, and how to get things done for New York City? That's not what I get. I get sudden announcements and plans that are often made without taking New York City's needs into account. So I would just say to you, we have the finest police force in America. They have driven down crime over the last 4 years. The state police have a lot to do around the rest of the state. And my central question would be, for all the rest of the state, are they getting the policing they need? Because we've got the very best here. We've got the situation under control.
DOJ last night made probably its firmest comments against safe injection sites.
Right.
Are you in any way changing the steps that you take? I imagine you're not backing off the sites, but
No.
are you changing course at all?
Look, it's a brand new pronouncement. The overdose prevention centers, to me, are a part of addressing the opioid crisis. And I think we have to be honest about this. The research in the United States and around the world is pretty clear. Overdose prevention centers save lives and give you a real chance of getting someone who's addicted to treatment and turning their life around. In the absence of overdose prevention centers, more people die. If we're really serious about ending the opioid crisis, we have to have this tool as one of the options. The Trump administration has said some things about the opioid crisis that suggest they're focused, but I don't know why they wouldn't, therefore, look at the body of evidence from around the world and consider this as one of the ways to address the crisis. As to the legalities, we have heard this for the first time. We're going to have to assess what it means. But as a matter of policy, we believe the overdose prevention centers really will save lives. Yes?
So the New York Wheel has 6 more days to get the project back on track. Last month at a town hall in Staten Island, you said that you would work with the Wheel to figure out how to work through some of the problems that they're having with getting the project off the ground. Have you met with them since that town hall? And do you guys have a plan to?
I have not, but the Economic Development Corporation leadership has been in touch with the folks behind the wheel, trying to figure out an equitable solution. Remember, this is a private sector development. We want to be supportive, but we also, this is not something initiated by the city. It's something we want to find the right way to support if there is such a way. That's what the conversation's been about, and I can have them give you an update. I personally do not plan to meet with them because my hope is that either they can resolve their issues on their own or EDC can figure out with them a way to move it forward. Yes.
Horse carriages, so saw what the DOT rules will be put out tomorrow. Why do it through the DOT and this rule process? Is it to avoid the city council and perhaps the votes aren't there in the city council to do this there again? And the horse carriage industry said that they were not notified, consulted, etc. about these rules. They are obviously against them, saying that they don't take into account the safety of the horses. There's no problems on Central Park South.
I beg to differ. Come on, anyone with eyes to see knows there's a problem on Central Park South. Horses in traffic is a bad idea. I said that in 2013. I'd like to repeat it in 2018. It's a bad idea. Central Park South right now, you see it all the time, the horses in close proximity to traffic. It is a location that we believe could be used much more effectively in terms of mass transit, in terms of our Vision Zero initiatives and helping people. It's a very, very busy area. People cross that area safely. We believe we have a much better way to use Central Park South while simultaneously providing the carriages with very good staging areas where their customers can get to them. They'll be running the same routes they've ever run. This is just a smarter way to go about it. It is within the rights of the city administratively to do this. That's why we're doing it. It does not require legislation.
About going to the council?
It didn't require legislation, so we decided to do what government does, and we saw a policy we thought made more sense, and we put the policy into place. Gloria.
Mr. Mayor, I want to ask about the BQX. The Friends of the BQX is largely backed by developers. Why not ask them to pay for this project, which would ultimately benefit them and the people living in the projects that they want to build?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding, and I understand why there's been misunderstanding, because some of the voices that first came forward with the idea were developers. But that is not the reason the idea is a good idea. And in fact, the routes we're looking at now are not the same routes that the developers proposed, and go in places that are not necessarily what they wanted and not related to their specific properties. What has now happened with the BQX is more and more become an idea that's important to everyday people. That's important to residents of public housing. There's about 40,000 public housing residents along the route. There's a whole lot of people whose lives essentially just take place within Brooklyn or just take place within Queens or between Queens and Brooklyn, who see it as a real advantage to provide more transportation. We believe it can be done, and it will be a huge contribution to New York City's mass transit. Just easy fact, I mean, about 400,000 people, something like that, live around the corridor, and about 100,000 jobs. So it's compared to any place in the country, this would be one of the most densely populated light rail corridors in the entire country. So we think it's a really good idea. But to do it, we would need the combination of the revenue that it would generate and federal funding. And that's the only way realistically to get something done on this level.
Follow up on the federal funding. You've spoken about how unlikely that might be. If there is federal funding that goes towards this project, why not put that funding towards the MTA, which...
Because it's apples and oranges, in my view. First of all, even today, I mean, this is an interesting one. Infrastructure is sort of a tale of two cities right now. The big concept of an infrastructure plan, one that we thought we might see from the president, is dead because of the huge giveaway to the wealthy and corporations in the tax legislation. It literally is a one-for-one. The infrastructure plan died the day the tax legislation was voted. won't be coming back. That said, in the budget reconciliation, the Congress did start to put more money into infrastructure. There's a beginning on top of what they did in the 2015 highway bill, which was also an expansion. So there's some good signs in the Congress. Now, I submit to you we're about to have two elections, 2018 and 2020, that could entirely remake the Congress and the White House, and then we will be having a very different conversation about infrastructure. In any competition for light rail funding, this proposal would go to the head of the line instantaneously. It would cover, I would argue, look at around the country, it would cover the most people in the smallest amount of area. It would be the most efficient use of money. It's clearly an area that needs a lot more mass transit. But on the MTA point, my vision, my hope, and I think it's a realistic one, is under new political leadership, there's going to be a lot more money for subways and buses too. And we need all the above. This city must have a whole range of new mass transit options. So I don't think it's either or, I think we need both. Okay, yeah.
I wanted to follow up on the BQX question. Looking at the time difference in the report that the city put out, the fastest time it will save is what, 10, 15 minutes? And in some cases, the route from downtown Brooklyn to Red Hook, from Red Hook to 100 Point is actually longer on the BQX. Given the cost of this and the delay and how it'll actually be more expensive if it's taking longer, how do you justify spending this much money for such really paltry?
Okay, yes, you are editorializing respectfully. Let me say it this way. I don't know if you've been to New York City, but most New Yorkers, to save 10 or 15 minutes each way every day would be, okay, thank you. So 10 to 15 minutes is a very big deal to New Yorkers. Something that would be paid for by revenue that is generated by the very existence of this new mass transit and federal funding is clearly a good deal for New Yorkers. But unquestionably, if you look at the whole route, you're talking about some areas that are really underserved, including areas with a lot of working people, a lot of residents of public housing. You're talking about naturally connecting a corridor that is more and more central to the future of the city, but doesn't have really easy natural connections. If you're in Astoria, if you're in Long Island City, if you're in Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Red Hook, it's not so easy to get between those places right now. So I think it's a good deal because it's the shape of things to come. We need more mass transit, and the center of gravity of the city is moving to Brooklyn and Queens. And I think it's a good deal because it's created with a combination of federal funding and revenue that only would be there because this exists.
Do you have information on, I know NYCHA keeps getting brought up, do you know how many people travel, for example, from the Astoria houses to the Red Hook houses that would justify such a specific?
I don't think of it as how many people travel from one housing development to another. I think of it as how many people travel from Astoria houses or any of the other, or Red Hook houses or any of the other developments to work, to school, to places that right now aren't so easy to get to for them, and this would make it easier. Now, I'll state the obvious. One day, the goal would be to have a cross-registration with the MTA. That's true for the ferry system as well. And I think that is really when this idea would become even more powerful and usable. That's going to take some time, but we believe it's doable. But do I know for a fact that people in a lot of those areas are underserved by mass transit? Absolutely. Go ahead.
I want to ask you about a situation at Rob's Neck Houses, NYCHA development. Where it's been reported this week that there's been a bunch of parties that involve drinking and sex that were apparently happening while employees were billing overtime. The Department of Investigation says today that it's going to investigate that after previously sort of kicking it back to NYCHA to investigate. I just want to get your response to the situation there in the investigation.
Yeah, it's unacceptable. And there have already been some consequences for some of the employees involved. There are going to be a lot more when this is over. There has to be a full investigation. There has to be due process. But I strongly believe a number of NYCHA employees will pay a very steep price for what they've done. We do not tolerate this. And our new general manager immediately initiated an investigation, but very clearly needed proof that was the kind of proof that could lead to the ultimate kinds of consequences like termination. And he has been pulling together that information. You're right, DOI originally chose not to get involved. They want to get involved now, that's great. But the bottom line is not acceptable, and anyone who participated will be really experiencing very, very serious consequences.
Question about ferries and the BQX. You go on one of those ferries, subsidized, you talk to someone, they got a good job. You might call them yuppies. And on the BQX route,
Wait a minute.
you take a ferry.
You're saying everyone on a ferry is a yuppie?
Oh, come on.
No, wait. You come on, brother. You come on. Hold on. I'm just asking you to clarify. I'm asking you to clarify.
Likely, you go to the Williamsburg dock, you talk to someone, they got a good job. They're being subsidized. You look at the BQX route, waterfront development, Domino Sugar. I bet you some yuppies might live there. I want to ask, what is your administration doing to make sure you're not segregating transit by income? Because if you're going to take the BQX and you're going to take the ferry, you're raising their transit costs, their transfers that are not covered by the MTA.
Respectfully, I think you're really missing your facts at the beginning of your question. So I'm going to answer your question, but you can try and steer it all you want, but I'm going to answer it based on the facts as I know them. Go to the Rockaways, go to Red Hook, go to Soundview. I'm sorry. People would not define themselves there as yuppies or as people who are well off. It is a mix of neighborhoods. Guess what the neighborhoods have in common, my friend? They're all on the water. That's why the ferry system goes to them. And we're looking at a whole lot of additional neighborhoods of all different demographic backgrounds. We have to take full advantage of the water. We need more mass transit options. So what I see here is, and I've been on the ferries a number of times, I've talked to the writers, and I see a whole range of people. This is opening up a world of possibilities. We have to see how far we can take it. The same with the BQX, which, yes, there's people along the BQX route who are doing well, and there's people who are living in public housing and everything in between. We need mass transit for every kind of New Yorker. What would be a mistake is to try and stand pat with the mass transit we have. We all learned a very valuable lesson on the 2nd Avenue subway. How many years to get us 3 additional stops? So there's none of us that think we're going to be seeing tons of new subway lines in our lifetime. Select bus service is a very important piece, probably the single highest volume piece, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that. Bikes are a big piece. But we're going to need all of the above, particularly as the city moves towards 9 million people. Go ahead.
No, the federal funding, because you're saying now this banks on federal funding.
Yeah.
You announced this 2 years ago. To be clear, you don't have an environmental review. When do you plan on applying?
Everything is being moved now, so the first thing we had to do was to determine the route, and I believe, I haven't seen everything that was put out today, but you've seen an updated route. Everything it would take to get it done, what we think the true cost would be. This is a big endeavor. As I said, it would instantly be one of the biggest light rail projects in the history of the country. So I know, and I respect why folks in the media always feel like everything should be done immediately, but I really want to put forward to you how complex these matters are. Now that we have a route and what we estimate is a budget and an approach, we're going to move the process forward. We'll apply for federal funding at the appropriate time. There is some right now. Again, I believe it becomes even more possible depending on the results of this election and, again, the one in 2020.
Okay, that for the past 2 years there's been no work on an environmental study that you would need to.
Again, I'm very comfortable. We've been doing the things we need to do in sequence. In the back?
So, with the new timeline and the new costs, are you not just delaying the demise of this project? Who's to say that your predecessor doesn't just scrap?
My successor.
Your successor, I'm sorry, your successor doesn't just scrap.
My predecessor was against it.
Yeah, but your successor doesn't just scrap this project, after you leave.
I think it's a great question about anything that any administration does, that these ideas survive if they're working and if they have a lot of support from the people. So you could ask that about pre-K, you could ask that about the Affordable Housing Plan, IDNYC, NYC Ferry. I believe they'll survive on their merits. This is a big part of New York City. And a lot of people are going to want this. And so we'll be moving it forward. As I said, I think the funding formula we've discussed is a good one, a fair one to taxpayers, and a smart one. So maybe my successor comes in and says, oh, I don't want to provide more mass transit to Brooklyn and Queens. But I suspect a lot of people in Brooklyn and Queens will say, hold on a moment. Okay, let me get a few more. Willie?
David was at the LED press conference earlier today. He he sends this question.
It's like a telegram. I'm impressed. Okay.
After years of declines at NYCHA in children testing positive for lead, the numbers of kids in NYCHA with elevated blood levels flattened out since 2014. Dr. Bassett said at the press conference that she noted the trend and that it was related to the time period when NYCHA had stopped the testing. So you had said previously, discussing these issues with lead testing, that thank God no child was harmed by lead because of the lack of inspection. Now the data seems to show that improvements stopped at that point. So do you still stand by your previous?
Again, I'll say two things. One, my understanding of the data is what we see is, from 2005 to now, a 90% reduction citywide in lead exposure in children, 90%. And that we are taking a Vision Zero approach. We're literally going to approach this with the vision of eliminating lead paint exposure for all children in the city. The numbers I've seen coming out with this report show that exposure continues to decline. We've got more work to do, but exposure continues to decline. The numbers I've seen also indicate that even when a child was exposed at a low level, the follow-up was strong, the health follow-up, the follow-up on the physical space to make sure there was no longer lead there, and a lot of young people saw their lead levels reduce and go back down again, which is crucial to making sure that they have a better future. So I've also come to understand in this whole experience, because I cannot tell a lie, I didn't know everything about lead issues previously, that if there's exposure, it manifests very differently in each child. We rarely know exactly where the exposure was from, for how long. What we do know is we've got to get the exposure level back down, and that we can measure. We have to get rid of the original source, and I think we made a lot of progress on those fronts. Ultimately, the big change here is that we're going to be able to get definitive answer about NYCHA, which we've never had in our history. And this is kind of amazing when you think about lead paint being banned in this city in, I believe, 1960. This will be the first time when we go through all 130,000 apartments and we use much more advanced technology. We will have a definitive answer on which have lead and which don't, and then we'll be focusing on ending the lead presence in the ones that do. That's going to be the ultimate difference maker. The other thing the report points out is that there's a much more real problem in private housing proportionally than there is in NYCHA housing, and we care about that too. So now we've made very clear that DOH will go and investigate and inspect any apartment, public or private, where there's a child under 6 and there's evidence of lead exposure. Go ahead. I'll do a few. Go ahead.
Be short. So just first, I just want to get your thoughts. There's been sort of an idea that's been put out there that the MTA should not receive new revenues, be it from congestion pricing or millionaires tax, what have you, unless it undertakes substantial internal reforms to reduce its enormous costs. And I have another question, but
Sure. That unquestionably, there needs to be further reform at the MTA in terms of spending its money more effectively. Just look at East Side Access. Now, I'm hopeful about Andy Byford. I really am. I think the plan he put forward makes sense, and he seems to be an effective person. But it's like the lockbox idea that I've talked about a lot. Whatever form of revenue comes to pass, it has to be clear what it's going for and that it's going to be used efficiently. Well, no, again, I want to say, I appreciate the question, but I want to put it in my own words. One, we need a permanent revenue source. I believe that should be a millionaire's tax. Some other people believe that should be congestion pricing. It could be whatever combination, but there must be a permanent revenue source. Two, the MTA has to do a better job at spending the money it has. Three, it has to have a lockbox mentality that whatever the money is demarcated for actually is what it does. I'm not framing it the way you're framing it. I'm saying I am hopeful that with the new leadership there, money will be used more effectively.
unrelated.
Yeah.
Speaking purely in the abstract, who do you think would be more capable of representing the needs and interests of New York City? A councilman who comes to events like this, or a congresswoman from the Buffalo area in the role of lieutenant governor?
That's a fascinating abstract question. I can't figure out who the people involved might be. Again, I'm not going to speak to the election coming up until I'm ready. Marcia.
So I wonder who you think won the debate?
I would say a couple of things. Cynthia Nixon was debating literally for the first time in her life. And when you factor that in, that she was debating against a career politician, unquestionably, she more than held her own. By the standard of how much experience each one had debating, I would say she won because her performance far exceeded expectation. I would also say she offered some very powerful views that I thought resonated. And I was surprised at some of the governor's tone. I really was. I obviously felt some of what he said was patently inaccurate, and I have made sure we put that out in the public domain. But also his tone was negative, and I didn't understand how someone who is doing well in the polls and has $30 million and is an incumbent would take such a negative tone. It just didn't make sense to me. Go ahead.
I want to ask you about a story we had earlier this week about an EMT, Robert Gala, who's the son of a high-ranking line chief. He's been arrested multiple times for impersonating a police officer. DOI has substantiated allegations that he's repeatedly blown off EMS calls while he was on the job, yet he's still on the payroll and has been since that DOI substantiation last year. Just want to know what you think of that, whether this person should still be on the job.
I want to see what the investigation shows. I'm not familiar with him or the specifics. Obviously, you know, I care deeply about the rules being followed and everything being done appropriately, but I need to see what the investigation yields. Gloria, take it away. You will have the last word.
Thank you. Back to your favorite topic, the horses.
Horses.
You had, when you came into office, you said, one of the things you said was that you would ban this industry off the city streets. It's now getting confined to the park. They will still continue to work.
It's not confined to the park. The places where you purchase the service is confined to the park, but the routes are the same routes that they've been in and out of the park.
So is this a sort of failure on that promise, since you had initially said that you thought the industry should be done away with?
Oh, you're covering some old ground, but I'm happy to speak to it. I'm not happy with what happened. I mean, obviously, yeah, and I've been very open about it. I thought from the beginning there was a very strong block of council members who had said publicly they thought that horse carriages should be banned. And I know there was a lot of pressure on them, and I think some of that pressure was unexpected. And I do understand, as an elected official, that can be a bit of a shock to the system. But I thought on the merits, you know, in terms of safety for everyone, congestion on the streets, if, you know, from animal rights perspective and safety of animals, I mean, you look at so many different angles. I just did not think it made sense to continue with horse carriages in New York City, and I thought there would be a council majority, even if it would be a very contested issue. It proved to be a different reality. So we've continued to look at ways to address the underlying issues. There are real safety issues, there are real animal welfare issues, we've tried real congestion issues. I do think this is a step forward. I think it improves how the industry connects to the rest of New York City. It opens up Central Park South for other better uses. And I think it'll make the city work better. But it's not the same as legislation, obviously. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Have you been in contact with him or his office? It's in his backyard, the DQX?